Hello and good afternoon friends, welcome once again to CEC-UGC live lecture. Dear friends, as you know that we are carrying a series on plant development, and within this series, or if I would like to tell you that we have conducting lots of lecture on this very topic, and as it's a series, we try to bring for you different insights, deep insight into this very topic. So under the series today we are going to talk about what is meristem and how long meristems divides before it stops. For this we have with us in our studios Dr. Ashish Nandi. He is an associate professor in School of Life Sciences, JNU. So first of all, I would like to welcome our guest Dr. Nandi, and I hope that as well as believe that the way he has delivered lectures in our previous sessions which have benefited students as a whole, I believe that this session is also going to be one of the productive sessions. So welcome to the EduSet lecture, sir.
Thank you.
As the topic suggests that what is meristem and how long meristem divides before it stops, I believe that it is a kind of a process when we talk about the plant development. Before I could say anything, I think that I would give chance Dr. Nandi to speak so that we could get extensive knowledge on this very topic. So over to you, sir.
Thank you so much. See, in my previous class I spoke that how life of a plant begins. And in the sense, I have spoken about how meristems develop in a plant, in a developing embryo, and then it continues to give rise shoot apical meristem and root apical meristem. So this is I mostly spoke about the embryogenesis process. Now one big question that comes is how long the meristem should continue to divide. In plant, the stem cells are called meristems. There is a reason behind it, I will tell you today. And so these meristem cells divides. Part of the stem cells differentiate into tissues, and part of the stem cells remain as a meristematic cell. So now the question comes that how long the meristem should continue dividing, or do they divide continuously for all plants? Or in other words, I can say that how certain plants are very small like the grasses, whereas certain plants are very big like mango, apple, banyan tree, which goes in enormous sizes. So how this is regulated? So its question is very difficult and answer is much more difficult. It's hardly one can say how it's really controlled, but this growth of a plant overall, how big a plant would be, is kind of associated with their lifestyle and a production style. And so today I have two parts of my talk. One part is how a meristem should look like, the cells, what is the speciality of meristem cells. And second talk is that when meristem cells stop dividing. So I hope it will be interesting for you, and you will benefit from this lecture. So the process of development, which I have been showing these slides in every class, is to understand how a complex microorganism can develop starting from a single cell. So like these pictures are shown here, where you can see from single cells the large plant is growing up. And this is the YouTube link of my previous class, when I said that how meristems develop in a growing embryo or in a growing seed. So is a continuation of that. I will try to tell today that what is a meristem and what is the speciality of the meristem cells. See, this slide shows a seed in the left that has two ends. One is called root apical meristem in the down, and a shoot apical meristem over here. So, these two meristems continue to grow and give rise the seedling, and then you can see this picture on the left that a small seedling develop, and the cells, only the meristematic cells which are in the center keep growing and to develop a big plant, and eventually this big plant would give rise go to reproductive stage, where again the only meristem cells would divide. So, the questions which I have put here is why the plant stem cells are called meristems. The stem cells are there in each and every organism, and all are not called meristems, but there is a specific reason why plant cells are called meristematic cells. For that, one needs to see how a plant develop. Basically, that also I have told in my previous class that plant growth is a repetitive unit of growth. Like the mer word is used for unit of repeat, like monomer for one repeat, dimer for two repeats. Now, if you look at a growth of a plant, that is a combination of multiple units, like as it is shown here, this stem and this is the leaf, and stem and leaf, stem and leaf. So, the plant grows like a repetitive unit, and that is why this repeat or mer is used for before stem or meristem. Like this is so building unit is called phytomer, and one phytomer consists one stem and one lateral organ. So, it can be very simple phytomer as I have shown here, or can be a very complex phytomer which makes the whole plant. So, this combination of phytomers come together and make the whole plant. So, where do you find the meristems? Naturally, all the growing ends of a plant has the meristems. Like the meristems are there in the shoot apical meristem, there are intercalary meristem, and there are axillary meristems. So, the plant, if you look at the aerial part, can grow either from axillary or intercalary or in the apical area. They also grow bigger in the girth, that is a lateral meristem which generate later on. And if you look in the underground part, which is a root part, again the meristems are there where the red arrows are there in the very tip end, and only the tips grow and root eventually grow up. So, the meristems or stem cells undergo differentiation. All the stem cells look similar, and by the process of differentiation they can get different type of cells. As shown over here, for an animal stem cell, it can give rise to bone cells, muscle cells, kidney cells, skin cells, and so on. Similarly, in case of a plant, the meristematic cells can give rise to different kind of cells like epithelial cells or skin cells, mesophyll cells, and vascular cells like xylem and phloem. If you look their structure, they also morphologically look very different from each other. However, the meristematic cells look much more unified. Now, the question which I am going to tell you is that what a meristematic cell should be looking in contrast to the other cells. This is probably known to most of you, and probably you have read in your biology books that meristematic cells are mostly thin walled cells, and they are capable of cell division. So, they continuously divide, at least if not divide, they are capable of dividing, and to enable them to divide easily, usually the cell wall is thin, so that they are more amenable for cytokinosis. They are very actively metabolizing cells. The rate of metabolism is very high because they do lot of jobs. And one important aspect of meristematic cells that they are highly compactly arranged. Like in this particular case, I would like to mention you that cells have the cells which are arranged in a tissue varies also on their arrangement, and as also quite naturally for stem cells, they differentiate into permanent tissue, whereas a differentiated cells have many shapes and sizes, modifies according to the position and the function is required. So, another next 2 to 3 slides, I will try to tell you that what is the kind of modifications they undergo and how they are compactly arranged. Now, just think of when I am talking about compactly arranged, just think of about you have a jar and these jars are filled with some stone chips. So, if the stones are little bigger, you can see that there will be large amount of space is left in the jar. However, if same jar is filled with sand particles which are very small, then you can see the sand can be present in the jar in a more compact way, or you can actually compress the sands in a way there are much larger number of particles and much less air space. So, look at these cells over here in the meristem. If you look, you will find that the arrowhead which I am showing here is the meristematic zone. These cells are dividing cells, and beyond this stage, this is the meristematic zone from here, and beyond meristematic zone, if you look, the cell size go bigger and bigger. So, in the meristematic cells they divide, and in the process of differentiation they grow big and differentiate. Now, as I was giving you an example of keeping the stones in the jar, you look at these cells over here. All the cells in this picture are taken from potato tuber slides, and all the cells are kind of a globular or spherical shape. So, you can think now a jar filled with marbles, glass marbles, all of which are almost similar size and have some bit of sphere kind of shape. Now, if you look at the arrow point here, if you look between in this particular case, you will find that there are large number of between every 2 spheres there is a space. So, there is a space between every 2 spheres, and so there is an intercellular space. Now, these marbles are packed, compressed, it is true, but still there is a good amount of intercellular space which is left. However, if you have to remove this intercellular space, then cell must be arranged in a different way. Now, this is quite interesting, like here. See, a default shape of a cell is a globular cell. Like when a cell takes birth, usually it comes out like a globe, and then depending on the requirement, depending on the position of a tissue, or depending on the function, the shape of the cell gets changed. This photo what is shown here is a one cell embryo. This one cell embryo in the top part, which is absolutely looking like a sphere, and there is no problem in this, there is no constraint on this cell, and there is no problem in maintaining the shape. Now, you look at this figure. The blue arrow which is pointed over here is an embryo which is a 2-celled embryo. But look at the shape of the embryo. Embryo is a globular embryo. Now, that is quite interesting. Here there are 2 cells, and both the cells are joined together to make a globular or sphere shape. Now, you see, if you have 2 cells which are immediately after division, if you have no constraints on the cells, they would grow like a globe, as I told you, or sphere. Now, you cannot make two spheres compress to make one sphere unless you give a constraint on the shape of the object. This is what is shown in the right figure. Like if you have to make a sphere out of two, then both of them should be hemisphere. So, both the cells in this two cell embryo are compressed and both of them take a shape of a hemisphere. And so, there is a developmental constraint on the shape of a cell. This picture again what is shown here is an 8 cell embryo. So, the cells have divided 2 more times and there are 8 cells in this structure. Look at this, there are 8 cells and all the 8 cells are so uniquely compressed that the structure of the all 8 cells is a globe or a sphere shape. So, now if you say that all of them must be equal in size and shape, then the cell structure will be what is shown in the right side cartoon. And here the globe is first divided into 4 quarters and each quarter is now again divided 2 times. So, each cell must be having 1, 2 and 3 plane surfaces and one spherical surface. So, now you can imagine that just to accommodate 8 cells in a globe structure, a globular cell undergo very high level of change, modification on constraints, developmental constraints to fit into the size of a globe. Now, this is the photo of a 16 cell embryo and there something is different than the previous one. In this particular case, you will see that the margins are marked with this line. What you will find, the cells are not similar. The cells here outside are flatter than the inner cells. So, in the 16 cell embryo, there are different type of cells where all of them again have been compressed into a globe shape. So, now it is not possible that each and every cell will undergo same type of change in the shape and size to fit into a globe. In other words, all the cells must be undergoing a change of a shape so that they can fit into a globe like structure, and there is a developmental consequence also. Now, you see here the cells which are outside, they are flatter, they are differently modulated than the center one, where the central cells have a different job, like it may go for a vascular cell or provascular cell. The cells which are upper, more flatter, they may go for protodermal cell or eventually they may make a dermal cell. So, the change of a shape of a cell which is imposed on a growing embryo has a consequence on its function. Now, if you look into a mature stem or shoot apical meristem, this is a shoot apical meristem and you will find that there are large number of cells which are highly compact, like you can see this densely stained cells. Now, just assume this area which is marked. The cells within this marked area are most likely to have same type of shape, because they are not making any specific organ, they are making kind of a large part of a meristem where all the cells have a similar kind of shape and structure. But as I told you earlier, these cells are also highly compressed. Now, what kind of shape can these cells have to accommodate themselves in a completely compact manner and without leaving much of apoplastic space, unlike what I have shown you earlier in a potato tuber. The mathematical modeling for the parenchyma cells for complete compacting has been carried out, and it tells you that to have a complete compaction with near globular cell must be having a shape with 14 faces. There are 6 faces which are rectangular and 8 faces which are hexagonal. Say 8 hexagonal, 6 and 4 rectangular, this is a structure which is called as tetrachidecahedron. This tetrachidecahedron structure can theoretically make it a compact parenchymatous cells, making a stems without leaving much of air space. Now, problem is that it is experimentally very difficult to show, because when you isolate cells individually, you will find as soon as you isolate them, this constraint for keeping them together is lost and often they lose the shape. However, experimentally it has been shown that the parenchymatous cell which are highly compact like this in the pith cells of this plant, they take a shape which is often having a large number of surfaces, if not completely but closely similar to this tetrachidecahedron structure. So, this is what the meristems are. Like the meristems are highly compact, they divide continuously, or they are capable of dividing, and they give rise to many differentiate and give rise to many different kind of organs. Now, one of the very important questions one may ask is that how long a meristem divides, and when a meristem should really stop dividing, or do they really stop dividing at all or not? The answer is yes, they divide. In certain cases they continue to divide ever, or at least they do not lose their capability to divide, and these kind of meristems are called indeterminate meristem, like shoot-apical meristem. Shoot-apical meristem, as long as they are shoot-apical meristem, they have the capability to divide continuously. In contrast to many meristems are determinate meristem. That means the meristematic cells completely differentiate into the organs. One example is leaf meristem. The leaf meristems originate from the shoot-apical meristems. However, after few round of cell division, all the meristematic cells convert into leaf. So, there is no meristem left. So, there are basically determinate or indeterminate. However, that is not a main point of my discussion. I will try to discuss today why in certain plants some of the meristems, or in certain plants they become very big, where the meristems never stops growing, and certain plants they do not divide after a few rounds of cell division. In other words, some plants remain very small and some plants keep growing and become big and big. So, to initiate the discussion, I will start discussing about a shoot-apical meristem. A shoot-apical meristem structure is shown over here. Usually they have a central hub, and that is for the shoot tip, and in the peripheral swelling, which we call as a peripheral organ, or for example here is the leaf primordium. Now, this is the, if you talk about in a time frame, say this is the first shoot-apical meristem, and if you leave it for a few days, the same meristem will look like this, where there will be a new meristem generating over here, and the previous meristem will convert into a full leaf meristem. This leaf primordium will convert into leaf meristem, and after a few days what we will find that this leaf meristem will convert into a full leaf, and the leaf primordium will make into another leaf meristem, and the shoot apical meristem will remain shoot apical meristem as it was in the very first case. So, the shoot apical meristem continues to grow and keep giving rise one after another leaves. So, that is what the basically concept of repeating growth or phytomere concept. Now, the question which I have posed here is that, does a shoot apical meristem never stop growing? The answer is yes, it does, and that differs actually whether it is an annual plant or it is a perennial plant. The annual and perennial concepts are probably known to most of you. Basically, annuals we call to the plants which are short living, usually the life cycle completes within 1 year, and perennial keeps on growing year after year and maybe more than 2 years, because sometimes we call biennial when it takes over an year to grow and complete their life cycle. However, there are some kind of it is a required in case of discussion, it is to be more precisely one should tell about its life cycle, because you see in case of annual plants they mostly die after setting seed. So, the annual plants, most of the annual plants, they would flower, set seed, and that then undergo a developmental senescence, where the whole plant will undergo a senescence and die, and the same plant will not give rise the flower again. In contrast to it, most of the perennial plant have a repetitive cycle of vegetative and reproductive growth. Like for example, if you talk about mango, the plant will give rise flower in every year, then once the fruit ripen, falls off, the plants will again grow for another 7-8 months and then give rise a new set of flowers and grow again. So, technically there are two terms used. The first group what I told you, which sets seed and dies out, they are called monocarpy, whereas the next group which keeps giving rise new and new generation, new and new set of seeds again, they are called polycarpy. So, our discussion today will mostly discuss about monocarpy versus polycarpy. So, these annual plants, they are short living, as I told you. In the left side I have shown you the mustard plant. The mustard plants are annual plant, they will give rise flowers and they will die, and the plants in the right sides is a mango plant, and there are hundreds of such plants which have repetitive cycles of vegetative and reproductive stages. However, this annual and perennial concept has become sometimes difficult to define when we look into a plant like banana. Look at the left side the plant, this is a full banana plant, and this banana plant, and there is a flowering banana plant. The banana plant do not have a proper stem. This is a monocot plant of a related to grass family, you can say, where there is no proper stem, but the stem is made up of the leaf sheaths. So, this is the right side, you can see here, this is the cut stem of a banana, and these all are leaf sheaths. In the very center of banana, there is something called pseudostem. This pseudostem is actually a flower stalk. At the time of flowering, the flower stalk go completely out of the plant and bears flower. And quite interestingly, like rice or mustard, which are annual plants, these banana plants also will die after giving flower. However, the actual banana stem lies underground. So, this is a true banana stem which lies underground, and this main stem is a perennial stem that do not die. and you can see a young new banana plant comes up near to the old one, which we call as a sucker plant. So, banana is classified under as a perennial herb plant. There are many such perennial herb plant, like one example here is a water lily. This water lily, there is a rhizome, that perennial stem is under water, under the mud, and it grows forever almost, and like the branch, as I told you in case of banana previously, like a banana plant you can consider is like a branch. So, like this big banana plant is a branch and the new one is a second branch on the stem. Similarly, in case of this water lily or perennial herb, the main stem is underground, and as a branch one after another new and new plants keep coming. So, there are many perennial herbs. These are all perennial herbs which beautifies the gardens. In all the cases there is a rhizome down, and which is like a stem, and branches keep coming up one after another, which mimic like a new plant every time. There are many perennial herbs, even like ginger, onion, they are all perennial herbs. Their stems grow under the ground. Now, certain times it become more confusing, like what is called as a rice, whether it is annual or perennial. Look at the rice which is green here in the top, and then this rice in the down is a matured rice field. At the maturity, if you look at the entire field, they turn into a senescence phase, which is like yellowish followed by brownish color, and all the field dies out completely. Now, this is a typical nature of an annual plant, where the plants undergo developmental senescence and entire plant dies out. However, this is not the case that plants die out because there is no water in the plant on the field. You see this picture, actually many of the people who have the opportunity to be in the village and especially are familiar with the rice field, they know that it is common to catch fish in the rice field. So, even at the maturity, even if there is enough water in the ground, like what is shown in this picture, the girl is catching fish in the matured rice field, which is already turned brown and yellow. So, it is not the lack of water that is killing the rice plants. The rice plants undergo developmental senescence when it comes into maturity. So, but interestingly again, like banana, rice also is capable of growing vegetatively. Like all the farmers know, if you keep about 3 plants sown in the soil, after a few weeks you will have more and more plants coming up by the sides, which are called tillers. So, very much like banana, this rice also is capable of generating vegetatively and grow in the side. So, there is a stem in the underground, and that stem can be considered as a perennial stem. However, there is a difference in terms of senescence. The difference is that you look here in the picture of a rice plant here. The left side is a green rice plant. Here many tillers have come up. So, probably 3-4 plants were shown earlier, and over the period of time, maybe in a month or so, the plants have grown about 15-20 plants. So, all of them have vegetatively grown. Naturally, all the vegetatively grown plants which I have been showing in the slides, shown in the slides now, just now, that they are not of same age. However, if you take it to maturity, what you will find, the plants in the right is the mature plant of the same plant. What you will find at maturity, all of them will die at the same time. So, unlike banana, this rice plant undergo a developmental senescence, where at the maturity all of them will die, and that is irrespective of their stage of development. And in contrast to it, again I am showing a mango plant here in the right side, which do not die by giving a flower, or it grows on continuously. So, I have spoken about 2 different lifestyle and life and reproduction style. In first case like rice, the plant would give seeds and die, and in the second case mango, that would not die by giving the seeds. So, this lifestyle, life and reproduction style, especially reproduction style, has been classified broadly into two groups. One is called seminal parity and heteroparity. The seminal parity, that name came from a Greek mythology, where the semel died after first pregnancy while giving birth. That itself suggests, in case of seminal parity, the individual organisms will die very soon after giving rise the first offsprings, first set of offsprings. There are, in contrast to that, heteroparity organisms will live and reproduce repeatedly and repeatedly. Now, the main difference between this seminal parity and heteroparity is that in case of seminal parity, the organisms put their entire energy or resources whatever they have achieved over the growth in reproduction. So, the basic concept of seminal parity is to make as much as offspring possible in one go, so that they do not have to depend on the second round of reproduction. In contrast to heteroparity, heteroparities are the ones which tries to gain maximization of their offsprings by giving rise sequentially. So, this seminal parity is very common in case of lower order animals like insects. Many insects groups and small animals undergo this seminal parity. However, it is much less common in case of larger animals. However, this is there in many of them, including the salmon fish which I am showing here. This Pacific salmon is a big animal, and there is another one called wood rat. This wood rat Pacific salmons, they undergo a seminal kind of reproduction, where they exhaust their complete energy in case of first round of reproduction itself. So, now if we talk about the similar thing in case of plant, I can tell you that seminal paras is like wheat, rice, mustard, most of the cereals, sugarcane, banana, which undergo a death upon giving a generation or offspring. In contrast, most of the perennial plants like mango, apple, pomegranate, all of them keep giving rise fruit year after year. So, they are heteroparas. Now, again we will discuss about how or what kind of differences these two type of lifestyle or the two type of reproduction style are different in terms of making the offsprings. So, this is the slide I showed you earlier, that shoot apical meristem continues and give rise continuously leaf and leaf. Now, during flowering there is a developmental switch, and this developmental switch, and what happens that the shoot apical meristem converts into inflorescence meristem. So, the same shoot apical meristem which was giving rise to leaves will now give rise to flowers, and so there is a developmental switch. Quite interestingly, this developmental switch is unidirectional. That means, in never the inflorescence meristem will convert back into shoot apical meristem. So, as I have told you some times back that there are two types, indeterminate and determinate. If you look into this scenario, what I have shown you here, that the shoot apical meristems over here which converted into inflorescence meristem and gave rise flower after flower. However, in the very tip there are some meristems left, and these meristems are capable of giving rise more and more flowers. So, this kind of inflorescence are called indeterminate meristems. However, there is a limit, like most of the flowers which you see around are indeterminate. Like I have shown you one example in the right side, which are antirrhinum or snapdragon. This antirrhinum or snapdragon, if you look here and if you take many of them, what you will find that it makes certain number of flowers, then it does not make any. There are a few flower buds and it stops growing. So, it is not like it can make fruits, it can give rise flowers indefinitely. So, there is a, even though it is a indeterminate, there is a limit how many flowers it can give. So, apparently it looks like even though it is indeterminate, the metabolic energy which is there stored in the plant to give rise flower get exhausted after giving rise a certain number of flowers in the side. So, eventually these indeterminate meristems stop growing, but some cells are left at the tip which are capable of dividing and they do not differentiate. So, it is not that indeterminate meristem or indeterminate leaf inflorescence meristem will have indefinite number of flowers. In contrast, the ones we call as determinate, when none of the meristems in the inflorescence are left aside as a meristem. So, here you can see there is something called terminal flower. This is a terminal flower. Terminal flower means in this meristem, the very tip of the meristem converts into flower. So, this is also like similar case where all the resources which were there in the plant to give rise flowers got exhausted, and the very tip generated or ended its division by making a new flower, making another flower. So, it is some of the examples over here. You can see in this case, like this is the last terminal flower over here, and then it stops. There is no more flower left after that. And there are many such cases where it gives rise a terminal flower. So, this terminal flower or inflorescence are the indication of that this particular meristems have stopped completely differentiated into organ. So, in short, a determinate meristem is the one where no meristematic cells are left aside in a meristematic form, and all the cells of a meristem are differentiated completely. In contrast, in indeterminate meristem, some cells are left aside as a meristem, but they may not ever divide and they may eventually die. Like for example, I will show you here. A few minutes back I told you this is an unidirectional conversion, like this is a vegetative stem that will convert into a reproductive stem where it will give rise a flower. It may be indeterminate in the sense there is a stem cells are left in the tip. Something like over you can see is a mango inflorescence. This is a inflorescence of a mango, it is an indeterminate one where you have a large number of mango flowers, and each and every tip of the branches there are meristem cells are left. However, this mango inflorescence will never give rise to leaf again, and at the end of the flowering or maybe the fruiting time, this mango stalks will fall off with the fruit or without fruit, and the new branches will come from the some other place, like which I am showing in this cartoon over here. This is a vegetative stem, and in some plants like in annual plants like mustard, rice, wheat, all the axial buds, like look at here, all the axial buds over here are giving rise one inflorescence. So, this is a reproduction style is called semelparous or monocarpy. Here all the energy or resources whatever the plant had and completely used for making inflorescence or offsprings, and no vegetative stem or shoot apical meristem is left for giving the next round. In contrast, you will find a plant which you call as an Heteroparous. There, say out of maybe 10, only 3 or 4 is giving rise the inflorescence, and rest of them are kept for growing vegetatively. So, if this flowering is completed and these buds which are not used earlier, this is the buds which are not used earlier for making inflorescence, they will grow vegetatively. So, this is the first year, and in the second year they again grow vegetatively and will give rise new vegetative stem. So, this plant will die. So, there is a death now of this plant because there is no more vegetative stem is left. However, this plant would not die. So, it will keep on growing and growing. So, that is what I was telling you before, that some plants they prefer die immediately after first round of giving offsprings, whereas some plants are capable of growing again and again year per year. So, there are basically two types which I told you, semelparous or monocarpic, where they would die after first round of giving offspring, and Heteroparous or polycarpic, they have offspring in interval. So, they have an interval of giving rise the population, and they keep on growing and growing. Now, but they are not completely unrelated. If you look into nature, most annual plants are monocarpic, whereas most perennial plants are polycarpic. Because, so now what could be the reason why the annual plants are monocarpic, whereas perennial plants are polycarpic? The most of the evolutionary biologists or ecologists believe that in case of annual plant, the plants are adapted to grow for a certain period of time of the year, or in other words, their survivability comes under question. Like for example, I am giving you example of mustard. Mustard is a highland crop, which is preferably grown in a winter time of year, and mustard is not adapted to grow under rain fed condition, under flooded condition, or not even under very high temperature. So, like mustard is not capable of surviving winter season, not even a summer season. So, a mustard plant have the development set up in such a way that it grows in the winter in the dry land, then gives the seeds. The seeds may survive during that adverse period, and it again grow in a favorable season. So, the annual crops are grown, especially the annual or monocarpy or semelparous. That is a type of reproduction where the survivability of an adult individual is under a threat. However, if a survivability of an organism is not under threat, then an organism would like to live long, grow big and bigger, so that over the years it can give rise more and more individuals for longer period of time. So, however, there are many exceptions in the nature, and there are very many interesting exceptions in nature. Here is you can see one example. This is called as the Helicala silver sword. Scientific name is Argixophium sanguiscens. This plant is usually grown in the hilly area and mostly in the dry hilly areas, and this plant is an extremely slow growing plant. It is a perennial plant, and this plant, the photo of what is shown here is an adult plant which may take 40 to 50 years to come into this shape. However, it is a monocarpic plant or semelparous plant. this plant undergo flowering. This makes a huge stalk of inflorescence, give rise very high number of seeds, and then the plant dies out. So, it is a perennial plant, but it undergoes a semilparous type of lifestyle. And again, this is a plant which grows in the environment which is not very, this plant actually can survive over the years and years, but definitely there are certain reasons, and a good number of research articles are there on this particular plant, that what is the specific advantage of this plant being semilparous, whereas others are heteroparous. Similarly, there is a very interesting example of one plant which is shown over here, and this plant comes in a genera called Lobelia, and these are mostly found in Mount Kenya, and there are two species I am showing here. One is called Lobelia teleki, and the right side plant is called Lobelia kenyensis. Both of the plant look like the silver sword plant which I have shown you before. And again, if you look at the lifestyle, both the type of plants needs 40 to 70 years before it flowers. So, it is a perennial plant, it grows years and years, but the plant grows only flowers once. Now, look at the plant, there is a difference, interesting difference. In the left side plant is a semilparous plant. That means this will flower once, it would die. But the plant in the right side, they look like semilparous, but actually a heteroparous. In the sense, this plant have a underground rhizome or underground stem, and what you look here, the 4 plants are actually you can consider as a 4 branches of the same plant which is underground. However, each and every stem or here each and every plant is like a monocarpic plant. So, it is a heteroparous monocarpic plant, where plants live long, perennial, and give rise again and again, but each and every individual plant is like monocarpic, which cannot give more than once. So, this is the cartoon which shows in the left side Lobelia teleki and right side Lobelia kenyensis. You see, this is one plant, give the stalk and dies out. This plant, there is a stalk underground, so one stalk flowers, dies out, but the underground stem gives rise a new plant. So, the plant does not die, whole plant does not die, only a stem dies. So, this is a partial monocarpy, but heteroparous and perennial. So, this particular type of Lobelia kenyensis is quite similar to what I explained you earlier in case of banana. This banana plant, upon flowering, they die. Like in the right side you can see the all mature banana plants which have given the seeds, they are dying out, but the young ones are coming in the side and they would not die until again it gives a flower. So, it is a perennial plant, it is a heteroparous plant, but each and every plant is monocarpic, in the sense one plant will give rise only once flower. So, nature has a very different types of lifestyles. This is bamboo, one very well known example. Probably many of you know, especially if you are in the village sides, the flowering kills bamboo, and almost all of you know about it. And if you see here is a bamboo plantation, here large number of bamboo plants are there, and probably they have a range of life, some of them may be 1 year old to some of them may be 50 years old, and none of them flowered. However, if in a plantation one of them flowers, eventually all of them will flower and all of them will die, which is shown in the right side. So, the biologists say that there is a biological clock in the bamboo and the clock keeps ticking, and once it sets for the flowering, each and every one will flower and each and every one will die. So, it is a perennial semilparous. There is still more perennial semilparous. something, one example is a century plant. It's a perennial but semilparous plant. So eventually what I have told you here is that all annual plants are semilparous, but all semilparous are not annuals, and all perennial plants are also not heteroparous. So there is a good amount of variations in the nature. Now one may ask the question, what is the advantage or disadvantage in both the types of reproduction, in this case of semilparous or being heteroparous? The semilparous, or most of the annuals, are usually short living. What I told you, their survivability over a period of a year is uncertain. So when the survivability of the adult is uncertain, every individual would like to make the reproduction as many as possible, like as many as offspring possible in one time, or it is called as a big bang reproduction. So they use their entire energy to convert into a reproductive process where they can maximize the number of offsprings, which can eventually again grow after the bad stage of survivability gets over. Like as an example, the rainy season or the summer season for the mustard. Also this is the advantage of the semilparous over the heteroparous. Now like again you can see here, like the rice stalks or mustard, entire metabolic energy starting from the root to all the leaves are diverted into reproduction. So each and every semilparous plant give rise as many as offspring possible throughout, so the production is maximized. So there is a trade-off between growth and fecundity. Like when growth has to be maintained like a heteroparous, then fecundity must be low in each and every time, or in other words, if the fecundity is very high like a semilparous, growth gets compromised. So there is a trade-off, and now there is a large number of research being carried out that what is advantageous over the other. And this is one interesting scenario one can assume. Like just think about an ecological niche where there is no more space left for any new plants to grow. So this is the ecological space where equally heteroparous and semilparous have occupied. So now semilparous are short living mostly, so they would die, and when they die there will be space left, and only then when there is a space left one new plant can grow. So this space which is generated will be competed by heteroparous and semilparous both. However, since semilparous has a more number of seeds, this will get the advantage in a competition over heteroparous. However, you may look in the situation that in some of the spaces which is occupied by the semilparous will be eventually occupied by the heteroparous. So you may think that heteroparous will be gaining in a situation where the space is not very high. However, we have assumed that heteroparous never dies, but eventually heteroparous also sometimes will die. So if the heteroparous dies, that space is now competed by both semilparous and heteroparous. So eventually survivability gives a question whether they will survive or not. So this is a now maybe I will summarize with this slide. This is the last slide for me to summarize here. What I would like to say that a vegetative a plant can undergo semilparous and can die, and they and heteroparous will grow continuously and grow big and big. Thank you.
With this note, thank you sir, thank you so very much for delivering such a nice lecture, and I hope that in future lectures also we would be catering to the students more topics like this, so that their basic need of missing the class especially would be improvised here, and they would be able to get more knowledge. Thank you sir, thank you so very much.